Quick update before we begin. For those excited about our upcoming book, Westfall, I have the unfortunate news that the book will no longer be released in October of this year. After reviews from beta readers, we feel it's best to flesh out the entire story into a much longer single book. I apologize for the inconvenience, but I think it would be best to deliver something that is exciting for you all and a joy to experience. Now then, today I've got some new and terrifying hunting stories. So if you're not a fan of hunters, you'd better go on and get, 'cause we Southerners are hunters, and I love me a good deer steak, no joke. Enjoy these terrifying stories and be sure to send me your unexplained and creepy experiences at darkstories.org so I can narrate them. Also, check out eeriecast.com for more terrifying podcasts like this. Now, let's begin. Warning. The following account contains depictions of violence against animals and also contains depictions of assault against men and women. My Two Paranormal Experiences. From Tyler H.G. 2021. These stories are not one but two of the most strange, terrifying, and paranormal things that ever happened to me in my life. I will never forget them. Both of my stories, these creatures I encountered, were totally different from each other. This first encounter happened when I was hunting with some friends back in September of 2011. The other encounter occurred at a cabin in October of 2014. While these stories are true, I will change the names of those involved for confidentiality. Now let's get started. I live towards the Glacier National Park, just northwest of Montana, where I grew up. Most of my life, I lived on the Blackfeet Indian Reservation, a place where you'll hear scary tales of the Goat Man, stories of campers going missing in the middle of the woods, where the Stick Indians come out and take people away in the night. Now, I would describe myself as 6'2", a medium build with a beard. Being of mixed race and having very light skin living on the reservation all my life, I hung around a lot with my cousin Dan. Dan was 2 years younger than me, liked sports, and was very good at basketball and played for the high school team. Together, we did a lot of hiking and hunting, also a bit of drinking, smoking, chasing women, and just kicking it with the boys every now and then. My cousin introduced me to his two friends for the first time out on a hunting trip back in 2008. We'll call them Big Tom and Mouse. Big Tom was just a big, silly guy who enjoyed talking about football and would always start singing to the country music playing on the radio, sitting in the front passenger seat in the truck. We would drive down the country roads and he would crack open a cold one. Mouse was 5'6", wore glasses, and had what you call a short man complex. He always had to get competitive over who's the best at what all the time. Later down the road, on my own, I would also start getting into different varieties of hunting wild game. Ducks, grouses, other bird hunting, varmint trapping, and learning how to make coyote hides. I would always go for the more exotic type of hunting rifles and guns. I would usually go for the guns that were the most efficient and accurate for the purposes I needed them. I would carry a Remington 7600 pump action, while the other guys just carried bolt action rifles. Sometime in September of 2011, all of us were in our early to mid-20s at the time. It was just the beginning of rifle season. I picked up my cousin at his house in my white 1995 Ford Bronco with two big light bars on the top, which I used for spotlighting sometimes. On our way up, we picked up Big Tom and Mouse. We were all trying to decide what place we wanted to go to do some hunting for the day. Big Tom suggested we go out to his uncle's place, which is about 43 miles north out of town. As we get about 30 miles out of town, we came to a dirt road. Out that far, there was nothing but flats and hills, a few old-time grain bins, and some solar panels and oil rig pumps that you can see out in the distance. As we came up to this old radar base, a green and silver striped Dodge Ram Charger passed us on the road. Inside were what appeared to be two older-looking men. We tried to wave at them, but the two guys just gave us odd looks as we drove by them. After making it to Big Tom's uncle's place, he goes in to check to see if he's home first, to make sure his uncle knows that we'll be out there doing some hunting in the area. Big Tom warned us about his uncle, saying that he can be a bit of a Looney Tune at times. As we were getting ready and geared up to hunt, Big Tom comes back out, letting us know his uncle wasn't home, but it would still be okay to hunt, as long as his uncle was still away. Big Tom was saying he had to go really bad all day, and luckily his uncle had an outhouse just outside the place. After that's done, we start to walk into what's probably about 200 acres of forest. There is a creek running through it, just behind Big Tom's uncle's place. We decided to split up into twos. Tom and Mouse headed out together, while my cousin Dan and I began to follow the creek all the way up. Then we made a plan to all meet up with Big Tom and Mouse down the trail. As Dan and I walked about 2 miles into the forest, we came across 2 competitive white-tailed bucks fighting for dominance. Dan and I got down on our knees and belly crawled, taking our time and approaching the deer closer and closer while they were distracted with each other. Soon they were only about 10 yards into the brush in front of us. Dan and I take the shot, each killing a deer. We then waited for Big Tom and Mouse to show up. As Dan and I started to walk further into the brush, we were suddenly startled by some birds. Then, right there in front of us, we saw a horse. However, right away, we noticed something odd about it. It looked strange and was just standing stiff. We approached this horse, realizing it wasn't moving, and it appeared to be hunched over a log. As we walked around the animal, let's just say what we saw was not a very pretty sight to look at. The rear end of this horse was torn wide open, and there were buzzards all over the place. I didn't see any other wounds on the dead animal, and I couldn't help but notice the tail had been braided. Later, when we met up with Big Tom and Mouse, we told them about the dead horse and took them to see it as well. A stiff and still standing dead horse with a chunk out of its rear. We cracked a joke then, saying that Mouse was just the right size to fit into that gaping hole in the horse and make a bed for the night. It was getting late then. We started to quarter up me and Dan's deer. We found some good long pointy sticks lying on the ground nearby. We used it to poke through each front and hind quarter and carry the meat over our shoulders. Getting back on the road, we found some tracks that went into the forest behind Big Tom's uncle's place. I turn only my light bars on while driving through a creepy dark forest at night, and this was just such an occasion. With my light bars on, brighter than heck, we spotted some porcupines in the brush. I reached into the back of my Bronco and take out my laser-sighted crossbow. I loaded a bolt, put my sighting on it, and used the lace to aim and shoot it. I retrieved my prey and wrapped it up, throwing it in the back with the rest of the quartered deer. While leaving from there, we were talking and joking until suddenly, wham! Something runs up and hits the side of my Bronco. We all were startled and jumped. I was driving at the time, and I said, "What the heck was that?" We rolled down the windows to look around. Big Tom even pointed his .44 Magnum outside the car. We looked around a bit, but didn't see anything weird, so we just kept going. A few days later, I told one of my other friends who's kind of a conspiracy theorist. He said a guy named Victor who lives on the reservation told him about something called a witch's braid. These appear on horses overnight. He mentioned a story where the woman thought it was cute that something would braid her horse's tail's hair at night. The same woman even said she witnessed Bigfoot attacking her horse and would even hold on to the tail while doing so. This caused the horse's tail hair to get all tangled in a braid-like pattern. When I told my conspiracy theorist friend about this, he mentioned that his grandpa told his mom that the tribe believed that Bigfoot would sometimes even kidnap women. In the Paiute tribe in California, there's a legend that states that a woman was kidnapped and assaulted by Bigfoot. The woman escaped, but it is said that she had a hybrid baby. The boy looked mostly normal, but was hairier. He grew up to have immense strength, better senses of smell and sight than normal people. In recent years, there was an article written about Bigfoot attempting to take a male Colorado hunter while he hunted in the forest. And there's a 2006 Bigfoot documentary that took place near the Glacier National Park, where someone found a small Bigfoot leg that had weird webbed feet. I think the documentary is called Bigfoot Lives. I'm not sure if it's still on Netflix. So basically, maybe it was Bigfoot we encountered out there. Maybe that's what ran up on our truck and hit it. Some weird stuff is going on out in those woods. Now on to my second story. Going back to 2000, my dad just bought a cabin from an old guy who used to work for the railroads. It was a small yellow cabin, which had a small bunkhouse just 3 feet in front of the cabin. About 500 feet west from the cabin, there was a train car. You couldn't see it unless you walked behind some pine trees. Also, about 200 feet from the cabin in a different direction was one of those old, barely traveled country highways. This was truly out in the middle of nowhere. When my dad got to the cabin, I was only 12 at the time and my brother was 9 or 10, and it was our first time going into the cabin. I could see a pellet gun just sitting there in the corner. I took it outside and began shooting it around. I walked down to the bushes where there was a pond nearby. As I looked around, I saw some ducks swimming. I pointed the pellet gun ready to shoot at the ducks, but my dad caught me and said, "Don't be shooting those ducks now." He even told me, "Would you like it if I shot you?" When my dad went back inside the cabin and was out of hearing range, I grabbed the pellet gun and took a shot, killing a duck. I watched it floating there in the water. I guess I just wanted to see what it was like to shoot something for the first time. I was a kid, and I didn't really understand what I was doing. Then I remember having this really scary dream at the cabin. In it, I was walking out to the living room, and I looked out the window, and I saw a deer, which should have been dead by the looks of it. But it was standing there looking back at me. It had these white, dead, lifeless eyes, and as it ran off into the woods, it made this unsettling screeching sound. That dream always psychologically disturbed me every time I thought about it. My dad would tell me I must have seen something on TV that gave me a nightmare. Much later in August of 2013, my cousin Dan and I, along with his dad, went for a little hike towards the mountain hillside in the Lewis and Clark National Forest. It was just south of the Glacier National Park nearby where the cabin was. I brought with me a 12-inch single-shot 10-gauge that I'd inherited from my grandpa after he passed away 8 years before. As we went deeper into the woods, we stumbled across an old run-down trailer house and some kind of barn shed on the side of the trailer used for putting horses in. When I stepped into the barn shed part, I was startled by these big yellow eyes that I saw staring back at me. It was an owl. My cousin's dad told me that it was a bad omen, that it would bring me bad luck if I didn't kill it. So I did as he said and pointed my 10-gauge at it. I pulled the hammer, then took the shot. As I watched the bird hit the ground, I walked away. I wanted to go check out what was all in the trailer after that. I walked around the living room of the old rundown trailer home, and I heard a thud. I turned around to see what made the noise. Standing on a table staring right at me with big yellow eyes was another owl. Or perhaps the same owl, but it should have been dead. Just as before, I took my grandpa's 10-gauge, pointed it at the bird, then fired. After leaving the place and getting up a little ways, I was looking around again using binoculars. I could see my dad's cabin about 5 or 6 miles north from our location. I told my cousin where my dad's cabin was in the distance, and that we should check it out later, and he agreed. Later that day, my cousin and I picked up a few girls and decided to make our way up to that cabin. We got into my dad's cabin, and the first thing we noticed was there was no electricity. We hadn't lived in it for a while, and my dad didn't pay on the bill for a long time. We were sitting around in the living room in the cabin, and we found some old chopped up wood. While making a fire, we started to tell jokes and drink. After a while, me and Dan get really blacked out and started a fist fight. After that happened, Dan and the 2 girls headed out. I was left at the cabin alone. I was getting tired, and I decided to head for bed. It was a king-sized bed with a bed frame made out of logs. While sleeping, I felt as if I couldn't move all of a sudden, and then I began to hear a voice, but I couldn't make out what it was saying at first. When I turned my head just a bit, I saw at the foot of my bed a sort of undead human-like entity. It had bleeding eyes and was staring at me angrily. It seemed really teed off. I'm not sure what about. It kept repeating the words,
"The devil is here. The devil is here."
But when it would talk, its mouth would not move at all. somehow still words came from it. In appearance, it reminded me of a ghoul from Fallout 3. After a while, it disappeared, and the next morning I left. The next week, me and my cousin Dan get over the fight that we had that day and decided to make up. Dan's dad, my cousin Dan, and me decided to go for a hike at the same place. After hiking for a while, we stopped by a creek and smoked a bit. After smoking, Dan and his dad decided to take a little walk. I waited down by the creek as they took their time walking through the woods and happened to just doze off while waiting for Dan and his dad to get back. As I lay there on the rocks, I heard this chilling voice call my name. I heard it coming from the forest when I woke from my short little nap. I realized Dan and his dad weren't back yet, so I got up and walked around to loosen up a bit. I needed it as I kept thinking about that weird voice that called my name. I remember it sounding really strange and disorienting, sort of like a hollow echo. What if nature was teed off at me and the wilderness was trying to send me some kind of message? A year after that, September of 2014, one afternoon around 2 p.m., I was in my newly purchased truck with a lever-action rifle hanging on the gun racks behind my head. I was driving down the road coming up from the mountain pass. After arriving at my dad's cabin, I realized I hadn't been there in a year. The last time I was there, me and Dan got drunk and fought. I decided to stop at the cabin on the way through. After getting out of the truck and walking up to the cabin, I peered into the window, and I saw someone inside. It was a man with light brown hair. He was wearing glasses and looked to be about 5'10". He was sitting on the couch, changing his socks. His face looked very startled when he saw me through the window. I ran inside, hitting him in the face and breaking his glasses. He was knocked to the floor. He looked up at me with his hand covering his nose. I told him, "What the heck are you doing here? Get out! My dad owns this place." The guy looked really ashamed and embarrassed. He apologized over and over and got up and left. After I told my dad that a man broke into his cabin, he told me to check for anything missing or if anything looked out of place. I let my dad know nothing was missing, but the back door was broken down and there was a nail stuck through the latch on the side of the window. Likely the guy put it there so that the window wouldn't shut all the way and he could get back in. My dad decided that maybe it would be a good idea if I stayed at the cabin, and he said he would get the electricity turned back on if I did. Remembering what I saw that day last year, I thought maybe it wouldn't be as bad staying there this time with some light in the place, and maybe some company. My dad and I fixed the place up a little. We boarded up the back door and tried to get the side windows shut. It was nailed down pretty good. Only a month later, in October of 2014, we got the place fixed up decent enough. At 8 p.m. one night, I went out to visit the cabin to see if the lights were on. When entering the cabin, there was a small shed in the front about the size of an elevator. There are kerosene lamps, a handsaw, and some snowshoes on the wall. Anyway, everything in the cabin looked good so far. The lights were running again, and I could hear the radio playing on the kitchen counter. I was thinking about staying for the night. I thought I could use some company though, so I decided to run to town. As I was leaving, pulling out of the driveway in my truck, I saw at the corner of my eye something just fly by. It landed somewhere on the ground in the dark. I didn't get too good of a look at it, but I thought I saw something that had a really long wingspan, more than just an ordinary bird around these parts. I then continued on my way, going to pick up my brother and our two friends, Ed and Cole. Ed was 6'2" and always wore a green alien cap. He had short dark hair, had a beard like me, and always enjoyed talking about conspiracy theories like UFOs and the paranormal. Cole had really long hair and wore black Cannibal Corpse t-shirts. All four of us liked metal music, and we'd all talk about going to a music concert one day. My younger brother Anthony was also big into music, but he wasn't into as hardcore of bands as Cole was. At the time, Anthony would sometimes have really bad seizures. I made sure to keep a really close eye on him. Back at the cabin, we were all sitting around inside, passing a blunt, listening to the radio. We picked up a station from the reservation of two native guys telling scary stories about skinwalkers and goatmen. It was probably just for the Halloween weekend, I guessed, as it was October. After a while, I stood up to go take a look out the window. I was peeking through the big red curtains of the living room window and I saw something very strange. About 150 feet from the road in front of the cabin and about 30 feet behind my truck, standing on the ground, I saw a bird-like creature. But it wasn't just any kind of bird I saw. Something didn't look right about it. It had a head and a neck almost like a man, but it had something weird above its head. It looked like some kind of horns. I couldn't make out what the face looked like. The bird thing stood there just staring back at the cabin. I tried to tell the other guys what I saw outside. I tried showing them, but about the time we all looked out the window together, it was gone. Soon after, we all got tired. Ed and Cole headed for the back bedroom with 2 extra beds. My brother headed for a different bedroom, and I slept in the living room. Alone in the living room, I soon noticed there were 2 wooden owl statues. I figured my dad must have picked them up at a thrift store and put them there when we were fixing the place up. Both of them were standing on the top shelf, just on the far side from each other, right above the TV. I went ahead and made a fire on the wood stove. When I went back to sit on the couch, I looked up at one of the owls. Thoughts were going through my mind as the creepy owl statue stared back at me, now lit by the light of the fire. I couldn't help but feel guilty as I thought back to the day I killed those owls last year. I began getting these creepy vibes, so I turned on the lamp by the window. I then decided to crash out on the couch. At some point, I was awakened and began to hear something just out of the half-opened window. It was the one that wouldn't shut all the way, which was just behind the coffee table and lamp I just turned on. The sound outside got closer and closer to the window. I started to feel like I couldn't move. It was all happening again just like last time. I could only move my eyes, and I could only hear what was around me. Then I heard something that sounded really weird. It was right outside the window by the coffee table. It sounded like a growl mixed with a muffled noise. I looked out the window. There I saw that bird thing I'd seen outside, now bursting its head through the crack in the window. It was flapping and screeching about. Now that I got a close-up look at it, I saw that the creature had no face and had a mix of feathers and fur with long, pointy horns, sort of like an antelope. The creature was trying to get in through the window. Its head was convulsing and swinging, flapping around fast and unnaturally. I finally snapped out of my sleep paralysis nightmare. I jumped up from the couch and rushed to the gun rack to my grandpa's single-shot 10-gauge shotgun. I spun around as fast as I could, and I shot the window where I saw the creature trying to enter through. But once I came to my senses, I realized the creature was now gone. Not long after that, my brother, Ed, and Cole came rushing out, looking surprised and concerned at what they just heard. The blast was very loud after all. My brother was like, "What the heck are you doing? Dad's going to be teed off, you shot out the window." We all stood there, mostly confused, trying to make sense of what just happened. I told everyone about what I saw. We looked out the window but didn't see anything weird. Ed, with his conspiracy theories, thought probably the entity could have used some kind of telepathic power to invade my dreams. Maybe it wanted to reveal itself and terrorize me. It seemed to have looked like it had the features and traits of all the animals I killed combined into one, coming back as a nightmare to get revenge on me for all the animals I've killed. Cole heard the same growling, mumbling sounds that I heard. Meanwhile, there was no other damage to the cabin, save for what we cleaned up, which would be broken glass lying around. We then cut out some cardboard and placed it on the side window to cover the crack. The lampshade was pretty shredded up though. After the incident, we all tried going back to bed. Later on, I got up to go to the kitchen. I then suddenly saw this black figure going into the bedroom where Anthony was sleeping. I went to check on my brother to see if he was okay. When I opened the door, there he was on the bed. He was bleeding from the mouth and going into a seizure. I rushed in fast, getting over him and pulling out my wallet, trying to get it into his mouth to keep him from biting his tongue. I called out to Ed and Cole for help. I said, "That's it, we're taking him to the hospital." It was around 3 a.m. then, and we carried him out to the truck. As I drove out of the driveway and got up the road, we all headed for town. I'll never forget that night. Around that time, 2 of my closest relatives to me passed away in 2016. It almost seemed more than a coincidence that I killed 2 owls, and around that same year, those 2 people died. The next time you ever go into the woods and you see a messenger-like owl, do not kill it. You might get haunted by some kind of creature or nightmare out for revenge. Mushroom hunting. From David Chace. One night in the middle of May of 2018, 2 of my friends and I had been hanging out, drinking, and joking around, just having a good time. It was around 2 a.m. by then, and we decided to go morel hunting out at the river, which is less than a 5-minute walk away. Morels are an edible mushroom, by the way. As we half-drunkenly looked for morels, we weren't having any luck and soon lost hope. We sat down on a dead fallen tree to take a break for a while, before we would head back to the car, which was about a quarter mile away by then. As we were sitting there, drinking some beers, we started talking about creepy places to explore and stories we've heard. As we got around to finally leaving, we joked about Bigfoot. We got the idea to do some wood knocks, since all 3 of us were into these kinds of things, and supposedly Bigfoot liked to knock on wood. We started walking farther into the woods paralleling the river, joking and making whooping yells and doing wood knocks. The same kind of stuff you see on those Bigfoot hunting TV shows. But no luck with any responses. We eventually came to a stop, and that's when we had a new idea. We'd try whistling really loud. Now, on this side of the river, you could holler and make all the noise you wanted, but you never got a good echo here. Not unless you were on the cliff on the opposite side of the river. Well, one of my friends whistled as loud as they could, and it wasn't about 3 seconds later that we heard the exact same whistle, like someone or something had mimicked it. And soon after that mimic, the woods fell completely silent. Now, why wouldn't the woods go silent for my friend's whistle, and only go quiet for the mimic? Our little group looked at each other in shock. My friend made another whistle, but a different kind, and it was mimicked back just as before. It came from the other side of the river, but it was closer now than before. It was at that second we decided we needed to leave. My friends wanted to run, but I told them no, because if there was something out there hunting us, it may pounce on us or chase us if we ran. I led them to the ATV trail. We told each other to only step on the sand, that way we'd make as little noise as possible. As we steadily marched in the direction of the car, we began to hear sticks and leaves crunching on one side of us. We stopped. Whatever it was took one more step and stopped too. Then we started to walk faster. We were almost to the bend then. That was near where the car was parked. We stopped once more and we heard the crunch again. And once again the follower stopped. Except now it was way closer, still on the other side of us. By the time we came within about 25 feet of the car, we unlocked it via the remote and we couldn't stop ourselves any longer from running. We got away okay, and we never went back. Still to this day, I refuse to drive through that area after sunset. At least, not without a gun. Almost caught by the rake. From William J. I was 12 years old when I went on a hunting trip with my father. That day, we woke up at 8 o'clock in the morning and got our stuff ready. We went to this wooded area somewhere in California. Sorry if my memory's a bit vague. We got into our spot we always went to. It was this place with a little dirt mound and small trees around it. However, that day when we got there, I immediately felt that there was something off. The whole forest was quiet. Normally, there would be bugs and birds and a whole lot of other stuff. But there was just silence. The only noise was the leaves and twigs that snapped under our boots as we walked. We arrived at the mound and began waiting for a good buck to bag, but nothing came. About an hour after we arrived at the mound, we began to hear the familiar sound of leaves crunching. "You hear that?" I whispered. "Yep," my dad replied. We kept hearing the leaves. Then, out of nowhere, there came this horrific scream. I jumped, and so did my dad. After we heard that scream, we decided it was time to leave. We began walking away, always keeping an eye out for whatever that thing had been. But then I saw it. A tall man, except it wasn't a normal man. It was far too tall, maybe 8 to 10 feet tall, and had paper-white skin that was so tight on it that you could see every last bone inside. The thing had bony, long fingers and giant claws. Its face was horrible. It had black beady eyes and a triangular-shaped mouth that emitted another horrible-sounding scream. My dad and I hightailed it out of there, with the creature staying right behind us the whole way. We got to the truck and looked behind us at the tree line. We saw the thing just standing there. Then it walked back into the forest, never to be seen again by me nor my father. Easy to say I could have been snatched up by that thing so easy that day, and I'd say I'm pretty lucky to be here and to be alive. Thank you for listening to another unsettling episode of Unexplained Encounters. You can send us your story to have it narrated on the show at darkstories.org. Unexplained Encounters is an EerieCast original series. You can find other horror-themed podcasts at EerieCast.com, such as Redwood Bureau, a fictional anthology series, Freaky Folklore, a documentary-style series about myths and cryptids around the world, Destination Terror, a show about the most haunted places, and Tales from the Break Room, another show I host all about the scary things that happen to people at work. Again, that's EerieCast.com. By the way, if you want fewer annoying ads and you want to support what we do, consider going to EerieCast.com/plus to sign up for EerieCast Plus. That unlocks all our podcasts with all but host-read ads removed. Until next time, stay safe out there and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.